Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Fireside Chat on Faster Companies, Slower People, hosted by Andrew Banks and sponsored by Compono. So my name is Rudy Kraus, and I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Compono, and I have to say, what a turnout. I was not expecting this many people, but I'm glad to see people are coming out, so thank you. Nice to see some familiar faces and some customers and partners and some new faces as well. Hopefully we can bring you guys into the Compono fold as well. So welcome. Also a big welcome to everybody that's joining us remotely on the live feed on Twitter or X, whichever version you choose, YouTube and LinkedIn as well. So welcome, you're in the room here tonight as well. As far as everybody's in front of me this evening, take a second. Have a look around, see who else is in the room. It's Thursday evening, take a deep breath in. Relax. You're in fantastic company this evening. Joined by HR and people leaders whose whole job, as our host will tell us, is to find the secret in people. Our greatest asset. And we all say it, but the systems you've been sold, well, they build for filing, not for finding. And that's the gap Compono closes. Understanding technology that understands who someone is, how your people really works, and how to build culture so that you can hire right, build cultures that good people actually want to join, and build capability inside of your organization that you can stand behind. And that gap, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why we wanted to host this evening tonight. Organizations more than ever are looking for technology, looking for new ways to use AI, measure the business, revenue to the decimal, sales lead to the number, headcount to the head, everything except what we keep hearing, which is their most important asset, the people. Where are your people right now versus where does your business need them to be? And the most important question, do you have the right people and capabilities in your business to close that gap? Well, we find that businesses really struggle to answer that question. And the simple fact is, companies, businesses don't perform, people perform. And so understanding that gap and how to measure it and how to bridge that gap is really fundamentally important. So tonight, we're joined by people who really understand that and hopefully can answer some of these questions for us tonight. So let's welcome our panelists. I'm going to start off with Matt McFarlane, give him a bit of a spiel. Yes, welcome. So Matt is the director of Foundation, or FNDN, a compensation consultancy building pay practices that are clear, fair, and competitive. He spent his career in startups, some acquired, and some that grew into unicorns. He founded the Startup People Summit, the annual gathering of CPOs building people function in growing companies. Matt's also the winner of our HR Influence Award. Next, we have Asana Rudd. Welcome, Asana. So Asana is the head of people at Preacta. Before that, a talent leader at Canva. Global talent, workforce planning, transformation. She's done a lot. She mentors across the startup ecosystem, building, including Blackbird's Giants program, and she was named Corporate Talent Leader of the Year. Welcome, Asana. And we have Sharon Gray. So Sharon is the head of people and culture at Oz Harvest, one of Australia's best-known food rescue charities where purpose and stretched resources meet every single day. And she's another one of Compono's award winners. And she'll tell you why kind beats nice. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, he's a serial entrepreneur. Co-founded Morgan & Banks and Talent 2, two of Australia's largest HR and talent businesses with combined revenues of over $1 billion. Yes, you heard that right. Some of you might remember him from the other side of the table on Shark Tank Australia. 5 decades of watching how companies and people really work. And someone actually really told me just recently, which stuck with me, this is the man who pioneered an entire industry and then dominated it globally. I know him as our cornerstone investor at Compono and the most generous connector in the business. Please welcome your host, Andrew Banks.
That's right. Thank you. Well, great. It's good to be here, and thanks to you guys, because you know what is it? I forget what. It's Thursday night, and you could be doing so many other things, but to come along and chat to us about things that I think are pretty important, which is how we get people through what's a very significant change. We've all, when you're as old as me, you've seen lots of different changes, but this is a very significant time in history. And very briefly, I was in HR before I got into recruitment. So long story, but I used all these recruiting firms and they were terrible. So I decided I could really help the industry a bit, and now the standards are so much higher and it's fun. But I've always believed in people and that HR can make a difference. And even in my investing and the stuff you've seen on Shark Tank, at the end of the day, I back the people, not the business model, which is why I'm in a lot of very weird things, which is good. So we may not have any silver bullets for you tonight, but we've got some questions, and we just really want to explore these things, and we'll also have a bit of time to get some questions from you. So we talked about this fast companies. I broke it down in thinking of, in practical terms, it's skills. Is it skills gap? Is it mindset gap? Is it cultural lag, or is it something else? How would you sort of define the challenge that we have? Who'd like to have a go at that first?
You're in the middle.
Skills gap, mindset gap, or cultural lag, or is it something else?
Ooh. A lot of pressure. All right, so yeah, I think from my perspective, one of the biggest gaps that I'm seeing at the moment between what I think are expectations that companies are setting and their workforce's abilities to deliver on them is very much a cultural one. And I think I characterize that as a lot of the fundamentals that have been true in business for decades, and I don't think that's changed. I think we're in a pace of, the pace has quickened, but things like being clear about what it is that we're trying to achieve as a company, understanding how people have a part to play in that, them being connected to it, them understanding how well they're doing it, how they're getting feedback in doing it. And I think a lot of these things are being missed in the current environment because we have this immense pressure to deliver and move fast. And I think we're forgetting some of the fundamentals.
So that's a communication issue, I suppose. Yeah, so any other comments on that? Go.
Well, I believe that culture is an accelerator for change and for what you can do in business. So if you do focus on your culture and you take those intentional steps to believe in your people and put the systems around them that can bring out their best, then I remember my first board meeting at Oz Harvest, and they said to me, the board said, describe your culture. And I said, it's slippery. And what do you mean by slippery? And I said, I've just come from a really old not-for-profit where things took months to get approved. And I said, the culture here, everyone knows why they get out of bed in the morning. Everyone is coming for the right reason. 99% of our people know why their job is, how their job is connected to our purpose. 99%. And when that happens, everyone's there for the same reason, and that's an accelerator. That's an accelerating culture that can keep up with the pace of the business, if the pace is realistic.
So that's like at Canva, you would have had that. That's hiring around a shared vision, right?
Oh, without a doubt. And it's an organisation that moves at pace that can't be described unless you work within it. It is on fire.
How many thousand people did it hire in?
Oh, I was there 2.5 years and I saw them from 3,000 to 5,300. So it's huge pace. It's huge pace. One of the things I think is interesting is when you grow, or even if you're relatively stable as an organisation, Change is inevitably happening because outside pressures in the business, right? So this is where the business wants to go, there's market forces, all of those things. What's not happening internally is that the org chart doesn't change fast enough to support that, and you get friction with it. There was a piece of work I did, because I stood up workforce planning for Canva, and we were forever trying to ensure that there was enough people pointed at the goals that needed to be done. And obviously what then tended to happen is people went, we haven't got enough people, so we need to hire more people. And I was on the other end of going, really? Really? You've got quite a few hundred engineers on this already. When you look down on it, they were delivering on this already. So it was actually being able to strip that back out and go, you're actually delivering on it now. Now that means that you're running on the red line, you're going to have a problem going forward. But as a structure, you're doing it. Not saying it's entirely healthy, but it was happening. But what wasn't happening then was the evolution of the org structure.
So if you think of people systems as hiring, development, performance, and culture, a couple of you mentioned culture, but there's a lot of pressure right now to get jobs done. So how do we balance that pressure between hire people, fill the gap, but not leave our sort of strategy behind? Because that's tricky, isn't it? I mean, so you send a whole bunch of job descriptions, fill these jobs, but then the jobs are changing quickly. So have you seen companies do that well? Have you observed anything that might be a
Matt,
shortcut?
that was a comment there in your head.
I mean, I'm from the tech industry who traditionally have very much overhired and then realised they don't have the revenue, and then they reverse course. So
depending on how much money they've raised.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'd say I've seen a lot of bad examples. That being said, I think as part of this pressure that we're seeing now, there is an expectation that you're doing more to validate the need for the roles that you're trying to hire. I think there's an expectation being set that with AI and the ways of work that we have, you can do more, and I think the onus is therefore greater on validating additional headcount before just going ham and scaling like companies of old used to.
And I mean, logically, you'd think if you're hiring people and you're not quite sure whether they're right because the resume is not a perfect match for the job, then training and development would be a big thing, and yet we're tripping up a bit there too, aren't we? I mean, everyone's got an LMS system, everyone's heard that there's various capabilities there, but yet there's a bit of a gap, my perception is, between having a real solution to improving capability to the level of competence that ultimately leads to better performance.
Always makes me giggle, this one. You can look this up. The research will show you through Forbes and Harvard Business Review, McKinsey will put this out. They surveyed 1,000 CEOs and asked them what was the most important thing, what was that they were concerned about. Putting an AI to one side, they say leadership capability every single time. You will have heard this. They go, leadership capability is a concern. What is missing is the follow-up question that goes, great, and how much money are you investing in leadership development? And then they go,
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm seeing the total erosion of the leadership level, right? Like we're hearing terms like player coach being thrown around where actually it's just a label to give someone 30 direct reports and expect them to still be an individual contributor in many respects. So I think there's immense pressure, and I think we're seeing that through the Gallup is a famous engagement survey company. Engagement globally is just nosediving, and I think it's being led by that level of the organisation, and it's really not surprising the ripple effects it's having across the rest of the business.
Yeah, that middle piece is being stripped out, isn't it? So the expectations above and below are really like that, so much pressure.
Yeah. Well, you talked about leadership to me and saying some things haven't changed. 20 years ago, if there was a huge retrenchment because of a change in sector, the ones that did it well had great leadership and transparency. But leadership isn't just about the top people, is it? Given the two biggest reasons why people leave their jobs, which is, I don't understand the vision of this company, and second, I don't like my direct boss. They don't treat me as though I'm, doing well and positive. So leadership goes all the way down, doesn't it? Leadership is a state of mind. It's not just a position, right?
Don't like the word down, like the word through. It goes through.
Across. I agree.
Across.
All
Everywhere.
around.
Everywhere.
It's around.
Yeah, but there's a leading of yourself as well. So in organisations now, there's that focus on being an individual contributor, but also somebody that contributes to the vision of the business as well. So regardless of what role you're in.
I mean, not many organisations have communication training, but if you've all experienced being spoken to by someone in a supervisory role and you didn't like the way you accepted the message, but you didn't like the way, I mean, so that's part of leadership training, isn't it? And it sort of leads to maybe what we would call the softer skills, but so important in whether productivity is going to be positive or negative.
I mean, most leadership training is on the job, sink and swim. Yeah, we are terrible at it. Nobody's ever solved for it. You'll have pockets of it that happen occasionally, but generally anybody in the room that stepped into leadership roles, and nobody went, right, before you get in there, here's this massive training course for you to do, or here's support for you. It doesn't happen. And you therefore learn from what you've seen. You learn from good leaders and bad leaders. And it gets propagated like that without sometimes can you not say those things because we're going to get sued. So I don't know if we ever will solve for it, to be honest, but then some of those friction points, we should strive better at it. We should all be better at leaders. And if you lead people and you don't go home every day and go, could I have handled that better? Could I have done a better job? You shouldn't do that. You should always keep that mindset to say, I can do this better.
I find this isn't a new problem that I've seen. It's one that's existed throughout my career, is that leadership gets treated like a nice to have or a bolt on. So someone who's been an individual contributor that gets promoted to a leader and suddenly they're doing their old job plus their new job plus a couple other things they've picked up along the way. And something that I think is increasingly important with organisations that are grappling with engagement thing, I think they're also grappling with a well-being issue as well around leaders, for example, that are doing 3 jobs rolled into one, and they're probably having to work 50, 60, 70 hours to do it, and actually sitting there and doing a bit of a time in motion study and going, right, what do we expect from our people? What do we think a leader even is? And going to the level of definition of saying, here's what you should be doing. If you should be having a one-on-one every week, here's how much time it should take, and actually how much time is left over to do individual contributor work or do the other things that you haven't let go of since you moved into this role, and giving people a chance to be successful.
And I think we'd all agree that leadership has become more complex as well. So how do you train a leader now who's got to be good at critical thinking, coaching, budgets, like all the different skills that are they in one person? I think the expectations of leaders and HR people, like give me a shout out HR people, it's really hard to do that whole scope that is expected within one role now.
But what you've touched on, which is even more sensitive than doing something, is convincing the CEO or the owners of the business that it isn't an employee problem, it's a leadership problem. So how would you go about raising awareness? So you're in an organisation, they're struggling, faster company, they're saying productivity is not where it should be, we're leaving our people behind. How do we start that conversation with senior leadership, CEO, so they don't get into the blame game and say, well, these people aren't keeping up, we need different people. It's a leadership issue. How would you open the door to that topic?
You've got to go for the data. Yeah, you can't turn up and go, look, all the feelings people, because they're just going to go,
Yeah.
The vibes up.
Exactly. The vibe. I actually had someone say that to me. I was like, who are you? You have to go to the data. And you have to take the aspect of what that company's trying to achieve and then break it back down again and go, here is where you have a gap. And the reason you have a gap is because of X, Y, and Z. And you have that conversation with the data and you tell the story with the data. That gets you over that trust hump, because nobody wants to be told, look, you're a bit shit as a leader. And in fact, half your team is a bit shit.
And what sort of, just expand on the data, what sort of data? It's about productivity, but it's about feedback as well.
Yeah, so you can pull all of it together as much as you can lay your fingers on. So you've got attrition, turnover. If you do run surveys, do you have hotspots here? Do you look at how long a leader's been in role in tenure and experience behind that? What is your operational efficiency in here? What's your revenue per head? Where is it the company wants to go, and what does that look like in terms of the revenue? Is that coming and translating through? All of those things will tell you a story. There'll be gaps in the data for sure, but it'll tell you a story.
Great. And so culture as an accelerator or a brake in all of this. If we're not doing as well as we'd like, how do we use, what do you see the levers of culture? How would you kind of make that a productive tool?
I'm going to say I have a different view on culture.
We don't have to all agree here.
No, we don't. We talked about this, didn't we? I am not cupcakes HR. Yeah, I'm not here for let's do sprinkles and cupcakes, and that's culture, and everybody's going to feel lovely, and everyone's going to have the vibes. You can have a lovely, lovely culture, and the performance is in the toilet. That's not going to work as a company long term. It is about, HR is pragmatic and business led. So if you've got a high performance culture, people are clear about where they're going, and you make that an environment that people want to come culture follow. You don't get to have the business pragmatism.
So it's an accelerator, you're saying. It has to be part of why the business is doing well. It's not just about feel good and everybody being nice to each other. So no, yeah. I think that's a fair interpretation of culture, isn't it? I don't think we just mean it. We all have to be,
We've been on our nice to kind journey. I think we were introduced as that, and that's been quite the ride over the last 6 years.
Because you're a not-for-profit. So
we're not-for-profit. I arrived 2 weeks before COVID, and it was a really nice place and full of nice people doing really good, meaningful work. But what we've been working on for the last 6 years through feedback training, through leadership training, through courageous conversation training is shifting that nice to kind, because kind is sharing that feedback and being honest with people and being open. I mean, I'm going to point down to somebody in Oz Harvest who's the queen of feedback. And, it is a gift, and we're quite ferocious with it. And we've trained every single person in the organisation how to give it and receive it. Are they all good at it? Maybe not. We're all humans, but that's the corner. That's what we have found has been the little cultural shift that we can then start to make some changes. That's like the foundation.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's a lot of definitions of culture. I think one of the ones that I like is that it's the way things are done around here. For me, I think of it as a system. It's something that you can tweak. It's something you can adjust. It's not something that you let happen to you necessarily as try to ensure is working in favour for all of the commercial outcomes that you're looking for. So for me, it is a lot of these things we're talking about. It is feedback. What's your employee listening like? Do people know what it is that they're working on? One of the challenges that I hear come up time and time again in this AI era is that people have so much ability to work and pursue different ideas and things, and they can vibe code this and create that. And it's diffused their focus enormously. So now they're working on these kind of passion projects rather than the things that are actually moving the needle. So again, that's not something that's new. Understanding what it is that your team and your role are there to deliver as part of the business is not a new management tactic. It's been around forever. And it's just getting back to some of those basics, I think, that we need to do.
Yeah, I think you touched on it nicely there. It's some of that ways of working about what is it and who are you when you show up in an organisation. At what point do you, sound terrible, when you bring someone new in, you sheep dip them on the way through. You go, here you go, you are one of us. And you put those little rituals in that actually is nice. I mean, it's one of the things, when I went into Preactor, they do this thing on a weekly win on a Friday at 4 o'clock. The whole business stops. And everybody does a little bit of a call out to everybody, so nobody gets missed. So all of those fabulous things that people do each week, and sometimes the wins are huge, but occasionally it's like that great thing you did, that way you supported somebody, that call out you did, it makes a difference. It means that everybody gets a chance to be seen and heard, and it celebrates the good stuff.
So just a bit of background on my involvement with culture. You get CEOs to talk about it, leadership, they describe it. There's lots of win stories, but this is 30 years ago, I got fed up because no one could describe it to me and help me measure it. So in a very old-fashioned way, we had about 30 psychologists working for Morgan & Banks in the end. But I wanted someone to profile it for me. I wanted someone to show me what my culture looked like and why it was working. Because, you know, culture's lots of things. It's also how you speak to each other. Your definition of teamwork might be different to your definition. Anyway, cut a long story short, we did it to ourselves. And we grew pretty well. We did it for Macquarie Bank. We did it for a company called Lend Lease. And then we did it for Bankers Trust. And we got good at it. But I have a little anecdote to share, which is we're a public company by now, and we're, got a couple of thousand people, and we're presenting to analysts, and one of them walks around the floor, because they're doing your stock, right? They're writing about your stock, whether you should be a buy, sell, or hold, and they're trying to get under the surface. And anyway, after about 2 hours of these people wandering around 2 of our buildings, they came up to me and said, what are your people on? Like they was, are they on drugs or something? They're all a bit fired up, And anyway, he said, who trains them? And I instinctively said, their mothers do. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, we hire the person, not the resume. And we put them through a very rigorous profile. And so we know how they think, not what they used to think about in a match. So coming back to you guys in culture, I think it's beholden on us as HR professionals to say, well, okay, we're proud of our culture, but how do we measure it? Do we have visibility on it? I'm not saying you have to put it in a box or a DAR, but don't you think that we have to get metrics on what we call good culture? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to define it, right? Like, I think I face this problem with a lot of either clients or just companies that I speak to as well, is that I'm sure everyone's company here says the same thing as well. So we want a high performance culture. And then the second you say, okay, well, what's high performance for you?
What does it look like? Yeah.
So,
and today it's cheap and fast. And I'm not talking just about Composer, I'm saying in general. And I'm surprised at how many companies I talk to, they don't make use of very simple tools to help them get that visibility. Because I was going to come on to another point. Surely internal mobility and redeployment becomes very important if jobs are changing and AI is impacting us and the business model's going so fast we can't keep up. Aren't we constantly going to be needing visible line of sight on the competence we have inside our company and the culture today if we're going to redeploy on a fast-moving basis?
The sad fact is that at the end of the day, for most organisations, LinkedIn sadly still knows more about our people than we do. You want to know what the skills are? You're on LinkedIn. A CV internally that may have brought the person in is moot, like 6 months after they started. If you looked at it against the job description, that's also moot 6 months after they started. That is where the companies slow down and lose that ability to go, who are our people, what are they doing, where are the skills, how do we move them, how do we redeploy them? And even in large organisations, internal mobility is an afterthought, or it's brought up at the time when everyone goes, we're going to have to restructure, so we're going to need to move people around. And then everybody remembers about internal mobility. But it is actually gold if you try it or if you get it right. And where we look at the impacts of AI coming through, at the end of the day, honestly, a lot of people, they're just placing bets here. Even I come from a workforce planning background that allows you to try and see around a corner of a business's needs into the future. You're still making a little bit of a bet. Hence why so many organisations go, we do not need customer service people anymore. We've just let 7,000 go. And then 9 months later, Klarna is rehiring all its people again.
Yeah. So that's a key point. With AI and technology coming in, we are going to be facing restructure of jobs because some parts of jobs are going to go, but we don't necessarily want the people to go, but we've got to convince them and have them happily doing a composite of maybe a different 2 jobs, right? And you can't do that without visibility. So I think I would assume you've got to have good visibility of what you've got now, and then as you add technology and AI, you then know which parts to pull and change. Does that make sense? How do we do that?
Yeah, come on.
Our CEO, so we've just gone through a big change from founder to CEO leadership, which is, has anyone led a company through that? It's like really interesting, right? And very different people, very different. And it's been quite the journey. But the exciting thing with our new CEO is he's really committed to transparency. So there's these ask me anythings, and people will literally are able to ask anything. And so that sort of brings up this idea around our mobility and that AI and redundancies and things. And he's come out with there will be no redundancies, like a promise to people.
Never say
there
that.
There will be
ever,
no redundancies.
Ever.
There will be no because of the changes that we've got coming. Right? Like we are beholden to funding. So if we run out of money, governments and, you know, and our funders, of course, that's a different thing. But our changes that we make and our improvements to our business and our different models, we will not make any redundancies. So that's makes me happy. You know, obviously makes our people happy. And we tested it this week because we had to take one day off one person because we cut a run, and the CEO heard and said, no, carry that person, find another role. So that sounds like nothing, but to me that's big, right? That's a big thing.
Culture shift.
And so I worked with deaf people before I came to this job, and their culture in Auslan is that's a person, the finger, and this is culture, right? That's what culture. So that sort of to me is that's always stuck in my mind as well. So it's just what's around that person, and if you focus on each individual, then that's your culture.
I would describe the market at the moment, again, I work in the technology space, it's very frothy. There's been a lot of redundancies. I think a lot of companies have used AI as the reason for redundancies, but that hasn't been the true one. There'll always be a need for redundancies. I think AI-related redundancies, we're seeing the impact that it's having on organisations at the moment, which is that it's scaring their employees out of using AI, which means they're therefore not able to capture the upside of using AI as well. So it is kind of a double-edged sword there. It's, I mean, there's so many great examples of companies. I think IKEA is a very famous one where they redeployed a lot of their customer service roles towards, I think they call them interior decorators, but they were like, you know our business, you know our products, you know our people, our customers, you can speak to them and help them find another application of whatever the chair is called, no one can ever pronounce it, and it opened up a new revenue stream for them. So there are examples. I read an article just the other day, Standard Chartered, I appreciate they're a massive bank and banks seem never to lose money, but they calculated every redeployment that they had made through AI efficiencies as something like $70,000 or $80,000 back into the business as a result of it. And just to add the third leg to this stool is that we are also seeing so much research and evidence about the long tail of the impact of redundancies on the culture of organisations, and it lasts for years, it destroys trust. People are obviously not as bought into your mission or as excited about being there if they're also like, well, am I next? I think we saw a famously bad example of that recently at a company here in Australia that said, we're going to be making some redundancies, and then didn't say who it was for like 3 months. Terrible. So, yeah, there's...
How to destroy a culture, yeah.
There was, I read a piece of research from Manchester University a number of years ago. So it was a metadata study of the impacts on redundancies on individuals, and it actually impacts your ability to trust for 15 years after after you've had a redundancy. So it impacts the wider community as well. So they're never things that should be taken lightly to that one. And yeah, shall we remain nameless organisation that did the AI. Oh yes, it's AI. It's not market. Heard a story of somebody that was actually made redundant, didn't know about it because they were on an interview, and then their system went dead.
Well, the concept of an interview is changing, isn't it? I mean, it's not just going to be a resume and an interview. I mean, some companies don't even use resumes, and they ask you to do videos. I know as a big logistics company in Europe, and they send you a questionnaire, you do the business pitch on a video, and then once you've done the business pitch, they do a face-to-face interview. So I think, clearly hiring processes are changing. And if you think of a world where our resumes are going to be less and less relevant because AI is doing certain jobs, then there's going to be more of us in the workforce that what I call look wrong but are right. In other words, your resume doesn't get you the job, but if they could read the brain chemistry in your head and compare it to the brain chemistry, this cultural style of their best people, they'd hire you in a flash. And that, you raised a great question. He called it an arms race. So I want you to describe what you think in hiring. Just tell us what your view of the arms race, because I think it's a great term.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to classify this by saying I haven't been a candidate or hired a role for 3 years, but I speak to a lot of people and interface with a lot who have. So the market at the moment is crazy for roles. Obviously, it feels depressed, but it's kind of not. You know, people are in this sort of job hugging, you know, sentiment. They're holding on to what they've got. But there's also this tooling now, AI, that allows candidates to be able to mass apply to roles. It can tailor the CV, you know, perfectly to the position they're applying to. And of course, that means that they can kind of, you know, relatively at the click of a button, apply to thousands of roles. On the other side of it, companies are then on the receiving end of these huge volumes of CVs and are responding in kind. They're coming up with, you know, AI tools and systems that go through and evaluate them. I'm certainly not saying that they make decisions necessarily on the CV or auto-reject or anything like that, but they are passing that information. There's AI interviewers. There's all of these things which I, again, characterise as this arms race of like technology that really, to me, just seems to be dehumanising the process more and more. It's making it harder and harder.
An inbox can get 4,000 resumes overnight. I mean, how do you handle that on the employer side? So I agree with you. It's an arms race. So what are some practical ways around that? How can we sort of tackle that? I've got a couple of suggestions, but you goes first.
Yeah, it's bad. It is bad. There's nothing more disheartening for the recruiters in the room where, you know, you put a roll up and you come back the next day and you've got 400 applications. And those, you know, when people talk about AI tooling doing a lot of that work, it does. But at the end of the day, there's still eyes on. There's still eyes on those CVs. So it is, you know, the dead space in there is huge to it. I think it is, there's an argument for how much advertising do we really need to do as against how much sourcing should we do? How much do we work on referrals? Organisations, you have to be careful about that because it can turn into we all look the same around here and wonder why that happened. But it's, you know, a lot of that work, it runs on the networks. I don't necessarily think putting more friction in front of it is actually going to help, because I have seen some AI tooling that can answer all of the questions. So even if you put that inside of your ATS and it's like 1 million questions, it does it too.
Well, if there's people in the interview, right, who can have the AI giving them answers to the thing midstreams.
If you put a resume in Claude and ask it what it thinks, it'll tell you it's great without context. So it doesn't help. So
it's really worrying, isn't it? Because you've got the AI-generated applications, the AI-generated filtering systems. You know, where's the person in that at all?
Sometimes there isn't a person. There's a huge growth now of like cyber for candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I had a client a couple of months ago that had to terminate someone who had a stand-in for their interview. Anyway, but getting to the solution.
They had an avatar. They had an avatar.
Horrifying, isn't it?
So
I
from a solution
that on
perspective.
Shark Tank. I would have bought that.
Oh,
It would have been a good business.
There's some good stuff
But
there.
see, I think that's where the role of data and people intelligence becomes vital now. And I would say to a CEO, it used to be a luxury, but now you have to know everything about it, and it only makes you successful. And you have to have the data, not just a bunch of resumes. You have to have the behavioral data, the statistical data. You have to have that. Then you have a chance of handling that arms race, because then if you give AI context, how does this person compare to the top 20% of my best people? It can give you a more relevant answer. And what I like about that is you can get to see the resume of, I always talk about the English school teacher, and she had 5 years teaching, you know, chemistry at a high school. Then she had 2 kids. She came back into the workforce, and I could never get her an interview. But when I interviewed her, I thought she was amazing, and I convinced one of my clients to see her. They hired her, and of course, she turned out to be a superstar, reading her brain chemistry. The nearest we can get to that is by matching prospective people to what we know is hard data on what makes us successful today. And that's where we should use technology to our advantage rather than feel it's a weapon that's killing us. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there was a piece of work I did at Canva that was started by Brendan, who was the head of engineering there, fabulous man. And Mel, bless her, had said to him, how is it I can't have a machine learning engineer for this piece of work that she needed doing on a feature? And he was like, I've got 2,500 engineers. I need a specific machine learning engineer, which is on a senior level. I've got 2,500 engineers. I can't see 2,500 engineers. It's not possible. So I convinced an engineer and the people data person who owed me a few favors, thank God, to build a bit of a data lake, and we pulled it all together to be able to, it started in Excel, then went into a Loom situation, so we could actually then identify for him. He could go, I'm looking for for machine learning engineer in this area, and we could pull it out. And then we pulled in tenure, and then we pulled in performance, and then we started going, I wonder what good teams look like. So then we started to go, that would be a good thing to, and so then it started to pull the teams together that are we turning these people over? Similar things like, high engagement, high performance. And then we went, so what's the commonality? And it was really fascinating. You could just dive further deeper into this data. Yeah. And to your point, some of these people came from massively eclectic backgrounds, but that sum of the parts together, still there was a connector about the culture.
And in the old days, this was expensive, time-consuming, people doing all sorts of psychometric tests in a room. Now, that's where technology can help us. How much time have we got before we got, how much, 5 minutes? 5 minutes, good. So we're going to open it up to you guys. We've got 5 minutes. Sorry, it's not a lot. But we're all on LinkedIn, so you can find us and hit us. But we've got 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes. Okay, is there a roving mic? Aha, roving mic. So hands up if you'd like to just throw some questions, or you've got an opinion on what we talked about, because
nice ones, of course.
Exactly. We're the bottom half of the class, you're the top half of the class, so you've got the good answers. No, seriously. Anybody? Yeah, we got a question over there.
Thank you, everyone. It's been an interesting conversation. I think something that crosses all the topics is connection. We talked a lot about individuals. When we think about data, we talked about context. We thought about culture, we talked about communication and things getting through with clarity, and then we talked about, I can't remember the final point, but how do we solve the connection issue in people, that clarity is there and that culture is obvious?
You mean when they're not all working under one roof? Is that what you mean by connection?
No, that can be one part of connection, because we now have hybrid work. Connection can also be just understanding the ways we work here. Connection can be, that sort of side conversation to know what needs to be done without it being explicit in a policy or explicit in a rule. Yeah. We have a feel for things as well. I don't want to go down the feeling things. And
okay.
That's something that I think is a big problem, but hasn't been discussed across all those topics.
Okay. Connection, go.
Connection is when the shit hits the fan, everyone pulls together. That, it's easy to be connected when it's all lovely, but when it's all going wrong and everybody's stressed out, it's that part that pulls together. Some of that's team, so it's the makeup of a team, but really, in all honesty, every one of you is going to be thinking about a boss that if they called you tomorrow and said, come and work for me, you'd go. That is where you get your connector from. That's actually the crux of it. To your point, it's culture runs around the leader. If you've got really good leaders, the sticky follower leaders, where they go and whole teams will move, that's what you need.
And you've heard this 1,000 times, purpose, values, all of those things, they're words, but they're very hard to implement, right? So if you really put your effort into implementing those and bringing those to life every day, they're the things that I think do connection. And really robust Slack channels as well.
That's where I went. Don't laugh. You're not allowed to laugh. When I went into the recruiting business, if you'd ask someone, what do you do for a living as a recruiter? I'll do my London accent, because the recruiting industry really sort of started in England. They'd say, I put bums on seats, mate. So what do you do for a living? I put bums on seats. So a long time ago, Jeff Morgan and I said, we don't put bums bums on seats. And we spent a weekend, there was only 12 of us then, and we came up with this phrase, don't laugh, creating success with people. And 20 years later, when we're 2,500 people, creating success with people was one of the things that drove the connection. You didn't join us if you were putting bums on seats to make money. You actually believed that part of your job was to help people find the job of their dreams, make the city, state, or country more efficient, the workforce more efficient. And that was also part of your job. So I think vision, to your point, is very part of it. That's what I got out of that. Next question. Do we have any more questions? Come on, don't be shy. Yes, there's one right there.
We've been talking about data. Do you see that there's a risk, or where's the risk of HR being overly data-driven? And where should we be using the data more aggressively?
Yeah, I mean, none of us wants to be a number, yeah.
Matt.
I mean, I think as a function we could do with using it more aggressively. I think we've traditionally shied away from it, and I think we're only now getting to a maturity as a function where our data's always existed in a bunch of different systems, right? Like a hiring system, a HRIS, and a learning system, or a culture system or something. I think those are slowly starting to pull together. Where do I see it being used more? I mean, I like the example that the one that I read the other day about a company that sat down and worked out what the saving to the business was of redeploying people. I mean, those are the sorts of measures that I think we need to be bringing to executive meetings. It's not, attrition's nice, but I think we need to go, how is it helping us make money?
I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of the data of the people function, to be honest. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. We all understand what EBITDA is, yeah? Everybody knows what that is? Right. Okay, let's try this one. Time to hire. Does anyone have a definition on that? No, because we've all got a million definitions of time to hire. I could give you 35 sitting here. We don't have a collective voice about how we talk about things yet, so we've still got work.
And I think your question's great because technology can actually help make the data more qualitative. So for example, the data that I'm interested in is that by team or by individual, by division, what their aspirations are. You may say, we've got to be more risk-oriented, and so you dial up the culture a bit, and so you ask questions around risk orientation, willing to take a risk when you're screening your next hires. So I think your question should not be viewed, the data should not be raw data about the base business and sort of basic human metrics. It should be very qualitative, behavioral. That's really where the power is, I think. It's a good question.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually take away from the humanity of people. The cool part of the business is to hold, we speak the uncomfortable truth. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily make us popular every single day of the week, but it also means we can hold leaders accountable when they are doing the person's crap, they've got to go. You can go, actually, you know what, we need to invest a bit more here. With this far down, let's see if we can turn this into a success story. And you can use the data to do that.
But, in England, there's a chemist chain called Boots. Some of you may know it. And I always remember they did a behavioral study because they found that they're sort of teenagers, 16 to 18-year-olds who worked on late-night shopping and weekends, had managed something like 16% of their total sales, and they'd never tested the behaviours of basically gum-chewing teenagers walking in, and they just got hired locally by a store. So they made it national, and the questions were: customer comes in and says, "I'm going on holiday, love." And I want some suntan lotion. So, is your answer, do you want 50 SP, 20 SP, or where are you going? On holiday, and so on. So you get the drift. About 5 questions out of 20, behavioral, warm, fuzzy, young, wet behind the ear teenagers. Gross sales jumped 1.5%. And so that's the kind of data that I think can make a difference, and it's not hard. Rudy will help you how to do that. He knows all about that. Next question. One more question. Okay, over here.
I just had one on culture, and actually why so many organizations actually struggle to be true about the culture they want and be honest about it. You see it a lot, right? Some organizations do it really well and they have a good culture. People talk about, I want a high performance culture, but the reality is they don't, because the high performance culture can be pretty brutal to get there. So how do you shift that dynamic from talking about it to actually really owning it and being honest about what you want? Because I think many organizations aren't.
No, that would be true. I mean, at the end of the day, a toxic organisation should attract toxic people because everybody gets on well and it works out really nicely. But most organisations don't tend to find that works as a sell job of like, hey, come work for us. We're a narcissistic bunch of whatevers. But you're like that too, come too. But there is a level where you should have that openness about who you are and what it takes to succeed. So people get that chance to self-select in or out, yeah? And it's very hard though, very hard.
You reminded me of that movie, the Uber movie, about the, have you seen that movie? And just talk about a toxic culture. But the other side of that toxic culture was a drive that was just unbelievable, belief in themselves. So, and I think in high-performance organizations, not everyone's a high performer either. I think it's all about making sure that people are in the jobs that they're both good at and feel comfortable in. And so a culture, I think, can be elastic. It doesn't have to be just about the time.
I do actually have a story. Does everybody like to hear a story before we wrap up?
Yes.
It's not all about me, thank you. All right, so I know this amazing HR consultant who was called into the BBC, and they were really struggling in their technology field to attract enough technologists, yeah? And I was like, that's interesting. He said, right, okay. Had a little bit of look at it, came back and he said to them, tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to go and interview all the engineers and we're going to sort of like put together a little bit of like, what's it like to work at the BBC? And they went, oh, who's going to do the filming? He's like, I'm sure there's some cameras around here. It's the BBC. Anyway, that's exactly what he did. He got all the good, the bad and the ugly. And then he redeveloped their website, put the jobs up. And here's the interesting thing. When you went to click apply, a little thing came up and said, are you sure? Watch this. And then he took all of the videos where everyone said the more negative side of it and played them. And they all went, yeah, oh, it's quite slow to deploy. You have to really work hard. Like, you're just not going to ship a lot. This isn't going to happen a lot. There's a real, they really look at all of the code. It takes ages to get anything done. You'd think that that would be a problem. Opposite happened. The applications went through the roof on people that they thought they could never get. People coming out of tech companies where the pressure is ship, ship, ship. And they're like, I'm shipping this and it's not ready. They like the idea of like taking their time. That's an honesty factor. It worked.
And that leads to authenticity, because I think, leadership and cultures have to be authentic. People know what's really going on. All right, I think it's time. I'm going to hand over to Rudy.
I'll grab that one. Here we go.
You don't need both.
Here we go. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and round of applause again for our panelists and, of course, for Andrew Banks as well. Thank you, thank you. You can stay seated if you want to, or if it doesn't matter. Yeah, that's fine. I took a bunch of notes too. Hopefully you did as well, some practical tips. Matt, I really liked your definition of culture, which is the way we do things around here. I always like to extend it by the way we do things around here in the pursuit of our objectives. Because the way we do things around here doesn't just happen. More change and more share market challenge. Good at measuring their current culture. So what is the culture right now? I think a huge gap that we see is very few organizations actually look at what is the desired culture. So the difference, that gap between current in the pursuit of our objectives. And to me, that's where a data gap sits. And I think, there's some questions around how data can help. And I really think understanding that gap between your current and desired cultures is going to be the key differentiator in terms of driving how you move your organization forward, but also the brain chemistry of people that you're bringing into the organization. So fascinating. Thank you, everybody. And look, we wanted to make this measuring really easy tonight, you know, between your current and desired culture. So tonight we're actually giving away Engage for everybody here. So Engage is part of Compono's tech stack that measures your people, measures your culture, and how your teams actually operate. So you can understand that gap and not just guess at it. So Nathan, there's a QR code right up there. So take your phones out, scan the QR code, pop your information in, and you'll get access to Compono Engage. Now, if your phone is running flat, you're not getting away, in your tote bags on the exit, there's a little flyer in there with the QR code as well. So no excuses. So if tonight's conversation really resonated with you, maybe, you know, held up a mirror, Engage is your next call. So thank you very much. Now, that concludes the formal part, but we do have a couple of gifts for our panel and for Andrew as well. So Nathan, can I grab the... Oh, you want to do Andrew first? Okay. So Andrew doesn't know this is happening, by the way, but a couple of days ago you sent us a video. Oh. Actually, I will tell you a funny story. When we first pitched to Andrew, we only had 30 minutes to pitch to him, and that 30 minutes turned into 2 hours. And then 2 days later, it turned into another 2 hours. And it was all because of what you've just said on the seat, which was, you know, you were looking for a way to automate some of the cultural stuff, measuring culture that you used to do at Morgan and Banks. And so, but anyway, I digress, side quest. So 2 days ago, you sent us a little video, you sent me a little video. And I'm going to play that video because the gift, what do you give a man that's got everything? It's very hard, you can't give alcohol. What do you do? So, Andrew, I do listen to you sometimes, so Nathan, hit the video.
You know, a funny story about culture, which has always stayed with me, was when we were running Morgan & Banks with 2,500 fantastic people and leading the whole recruitment industry. Financial analysts asked me, having walked around our company, your people are amazing. Who trains them? And I instinctively said, their mothers do. And that was a reference to, at the end of the day, you've got to hire people for who they are and how they fit into your culture, not what they have on their resume.
So Andrew, I've got a gift for you, but the request is you've got to open it and show us because, like I said, it was a very, very hard thing to buy something for Andrew, gets Andrew something.
I'm expecting something to pop out of this. Trained by mum. Oh, I see. I'm a golfer. So these go on golf clubs, right? So these go on golf clubs. So that says trained by mum. And what does this one says? Mother's job is acting. My other job is acting. Oh, there. Well, thank you.
And we've also got packages for you guys. So Nathan, if you can pass that over, that'd be great. Thank you. I'm breaking it. Sharon, thank you very much. Beautiful. I'll give you a cuddle. Thank you. Matt, you want a cuddle too? Yeah, there we go. It's a lot of love. Asana. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the formal part, but ladies and gentlemen, we're not done yet. If you want to hang around, we're going to have some drinks at, I'm going to say Crew Bar in Brisbane. No, Brewdog, apologies, just around the corner. It's a cash bar, but if you want to have a drink with the panelists, please join us for a beer. If you're heading home, thank you for spending your Thursday evening with us. I hope you got to meet someone you didn't come with this evening. Drive safely and safe travels. Thank you for coming.